strategic and tactical weaponry. The governor's proposed skipping a generation of technology. I think that would be a mistake, because I think one of the ways we've been able to be so successful in Kosovo and Bosnia and Haiti and in other places is by having the technological edge. You know, we won that conflict in Kosovo without losing a single human life in combat, a single American life in combat. Now, readiness. The trends before I got my current job were on the decline. The number of divisions were reduced. I argued that we should reverse that trend and take it back up, and I'm happy to tell you that we have. Now, in my budget for the next 10 years, I propose $100 billion for this purpose. The governor proposes $45 billion. I propose more than twice as much because I think it's needed.
Governor Bush, 2 minutes.
If this were a spending contest, I'd come in second. I readily admit I'm not going to grow the size of the federal government like he is. Your question was deployment. It must be in the national interests, it must be in our vital interests whether we ever send troops. The mission must be clear. Soldiers must understand why we're going. The force must be strong enough so that the mission can be accomplished, and the exit strategy needs to be well defined. I'm concerned that we're over-deployed around the world. See, I think the mission has somewhat become fuzzy. Should I be fortunate enough to earn your confidence? The mission of the United States military will be to be prepared and ready to fight and win war, and therefore prevent war from happening in the first place. There may be some moments when we use our troops as peacekeepers, but not often. The Vice President mentioned my view of the long term for the military. I want to make sure the equipment for our military is the best it can possibly be, of course. But we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to use our research and development capacities, the great technology of the United States, to make our military lighter, harder to find, more lethal. We have an opportunity, really, if you think about it, if we're smart and have got a strategic vision and a leader who understands strategic planning, to make sure that we change the terms of the battlefield of the future so we can keep the peace. This is a peaceful nation, and I intend to keep the peace. Spending money is one thing, but spending money without a strategic plan can oftentimes be wasted. The first thing I'm going to do is ask the Secretary of Defense to develop a plan, so we're making sure we're not spending our money on political projects, but on projects to make sure our soldiers are well paid, well housed, and have the best equipment in the world.
Governor Bush, another kind of gun question. It'll be asked by Robert Lutz. Mr. Lutz?
Governor Bush.
Yes, sir.
We'd just like to know, what is your opposition to the Brady handgun bill?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
We'd like to know why you object to the Brady handgun bill, if you do object to it. Because on a recent TV ad, it showed that the National Rifle Association says if you are elected, that they will be working out of your office.
Well,
I can just see.
I don't think the National Rifle Association ran that ad, but let me just tell you my position on guns in general, sir, if you don't mind.
Excuse me, I'm not sure he's finished with his question,
I'm sorry.
Governor. I'm sorry.
Well, that kind of bothers me, you know, when I see that ad like that. I wonder if you can explain that ad to me.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, I don't think I ran the ad. I think somebody who doesn't want me to be president might have run that ad. That wasn't my ad, and I think it might have been one of my opponent's ads. Here's what I believe, sir. I believe law-abiding citizens ought to be allowed to protect themselves and their families. I believe that we ought to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. That's why I'm for instant background checks at gun shows. I'm for trigger locks. I think that makes sense. Matter of fact, we distributed free trigger locks in the state of Texas so that people can get them and put them on their guns to make their guns more safe. I think we ought to raise the age at which juveniles can have a gun. But I also believe strongly that we need to enforce laws on the books, that the best way to make sure that we keep our society safe and secure is to hold people accountable for breaking the law. If we catch somebody illegally selling a gun, there needs to be a consequence. If we keep somebody illegally using a gun, there needs to be a consequence. Enforcement of law, and the federal government can help It's a great program called Project Exile in Richmond, Virginia. We focused federal taxpayers' money and federal prosecutors and went after people who were illegally using guns. To me, that's how you make society the safest it can be. And so, yeah, sometimes I agree with some of these groups in Washington, and sometimes I don't. I'm a pretty independent thinker. But one thing I'm for is a safe society. And I'm for enforcing laws on the books, and that's what's going to happen should I earn your confidence.
Vice President Gore?
Well, it was not one of my ads either, Governor. But I am familiar with the statement, and it was made by one of the top-ranking officials of that organization. Let me tell you my position. I think that some common-sense gun safety measures are certainly needed with the flood of cheap handguns that have sometimes been working their way into the hands of the wrong people. But all of my proposals are focused on that problem, gun safety. None of my proposals would have any effect on hunters or sportsmen or people who use rifles. They're aimed at the real problem. Let's make our schools safe. Let's make our neighborhoods safe. Let's have a 3-day waiting period, cooling off, so we can have a background check to make sure that criminals and people who really shouldn't have guns don't get them. But I'd like to use my remaining time on this exchange, Jim, to respond to an exchange that took place just a moment ago, because a couple of times the governor has said that I am for a bigger government. Governor, I'm not. And let me tell you what the record shows. For the last 8 years, I have had the challenge of running the streamlining program called Reinventing Government. And if there are any federal employees in this group, you know what that means. The federal government has been reduced in size by more than 300,000 people. And it's now the smallest number that we have had since, the smallest in size since John Kennedy's administration. During the last 5 years, Texas's government has gone up in size. Federal government has gone down. Texas's government has gone up. Now, my plan for the future, I see a time when we have smaller, smarter government where you don't have to wait in line because you can get services online. Cheaper, better, faster. We can do that.
Steve Luker has a question, and it is for Vice President Gore. Mr. Luker? There you are.
Vice President Gore, the family farms are disappearing and having a hard time even in the current positive economic environment. What steps would you or your administration take on agricultural policy developments to protect the family farms for this multifunctional service they perform?
We've got a bumper crop this year, but that's the good news. You know what the bad news is that follows on that. The prices are low. In the last several years, the so-called freedom to farm law has, in my view, been mostly a failure. I want to change many of its provisions. Now, many here who are not involved in farming won't follow this, so just forgive me, because the 2% of the country that is involved in farming is important because the rest of us wouldn't eat except for them. And you guys have been having a hard time, and I want to fight for you. I want to change those provisions. I want to restore a meaningful safety net. And I think that you pointed the way in your comments, because when you say there are multiple things accomplished by farmers, you're specifically including conservation and protection of the environment. And yes, farmers are the first environmentalists.